The atmosphere was thick with tension. The air was heavy, vibrating with an energy that crackled through the dense silence. The cold steel walls of the alien ship, towering above him, reflected the pale glow of distant stars through the viewport. Ethan Parker, a man from Earth, stood alone in the heart of an alien warship, defiant, his breath shallow but steady. Before him stood the might of an entire species, a race of powerful, ruthless warriors who had crushed civilizations across the galaxy. And yet, here he was. Earth, Zyra, the leader of the alien warriors, sneered, her voice like cold steel. A pathetic little rock in the far corner of the universe. Your kind is nothing but an embarrassment, clinging to life in a place that should have been wiped clean long ago. She stood with her arms crossed, towering over him. Her armor gleamed with dark, metallic sheen, its intricate designs shimmering under the dim lights of the ship. Her face was angular, sharp, with an expression of contempt that came as naturally to her as breathing. Her eyes, glowing faintly with an unnatural light, looked down on him, radiating superiority. Ethan's jaw clenched as he stood firm, not allowing a single hint of fear to cross his features. He had been through hell to get here, through battles, dangers, and betrayals. A simple alien threat would not break him. You don't get it, do you? Zyra continued, her voice dripping with disdain. For thousands of years, we've wiped out species like yours. We take planets, we conquer them. And we destroy the weak, the insignificant. Earth was never meant to survive. It's a relic, a joke. Yet here you stand. A single human, defying us. Ethan met her gaze without flinching, his heart pounding with adrenaline. He had been captured after a failed mission, and now he stood on the precipice of his fate. But there was something burning inside him, an ember of hope, or maybe rage, that refused to extinguish. I'm not the one who's weak, he said, his voice steady, cutting through the oppressive air. You may have conquered worlds, Zyra, but you've never faced humanity before. You think you've seen power? You haven't seen anything yet. Zyra's lips curled into a cruel smile. Power? What do you know of power, human? You are nothing but a fleeting spark in a universe of cold indifference. But there was something in Ethan's eyes, something that made Zyra pause. It wasn't fear, and it wasn't desperation. It was something she hadn't expected, something she hadn't prepared for. The human before her didn't tremble at her strength. Instead, he stared back with an intensity that threatened to burn through the cold, calculated veneer she had worn for centuries. Zyra stepped closer, her voice lowering. Tell me, human. What do you hope to achieve? You can't escape. There's nowhere to run. I will destroy you, just like I have destroyed so many before you. Ethan stood his ground. His hands were clenched into fists, but there was no sign of submission in him. His thoughts flashed back to Earth, his home, his people. They had always been underestimated, always overlooked by those who thought they were superior. But humanity had survived against every odd, every threat. And he would not let that die today. I'm not going to run, he said, his voice unwavering. And you're not going to destroy me. Because I'm not the weak one here. Zyra's eyes narrowed. She took a step back, crossing her arms, studying him. The human's confidence was unnerving, to say the least. Most beings would have broken by now, kneeling in fear, begging for their lives. But Ethan? He wasn't afraid. And that infuriated her. You don't know what you're up against, she spat. I am Zyra, the commander of the Warborn. I have destroyed entire worlds. You are nothing. You should be begging for mercy. Mercy? Ethan scoffed, the corner of his mouth twitching in a half-smile. I don't need mercy. You're the one who needs to fear us. At that, Zyra's expression darkened, her eyes glowing brighter, casting an eerie light across the room. You speak of fear? What could a pathetic human like you possibly do that would make me fear you? She hissed. For a moment, there was only silence, broken only by the hum of the ship's engines in the background. Ethan's mind raced. He didn't have the firepower to take down this alien warrior, he knew that. He didn't have a weapon, no high-tech gadgets, nothing but his wits and his will to survive. But there was one thing humanity had that no other species had ever fully understood: adaptability. You really don't get it, do you? Ethan said softly, almost to himself. You think we're weak because we don't have your weapons or your technology. But you've never fought against something like humanity. Zyra let out a low laugh. Enough of this nonsense. It's time for you to learn your place, human. With a flick of her wrist, she summoned an energy blade, its sharp edge crackling with blue energy. She raised it high, preparing to strike. But Ethan's heart didn't race with fear. Instead, a plan began to form in his mind. He had to buy himself time. Time for what, exactly, he wasn't sure, but he knew one thing: he couldn't back down. In one swift movement, Zyra brought the blade down, aiming straight for his chest. The energy crackled in the air, filling the space with an electric buzz. Ethan didn't move. Instead, he stood frozen, his eyes locked on hers. And then, just before the blade could make contact, something incredible happened. The air around Ethan seemed to shimmer for a split second, a distortion, a flash of light. The alien blade stopped inches from his body, as if an invisible force had blocked it. Zyra blinked in confusion, her expression faltering. What is this? Ethan's hand moved, slow and deliberate, towards his chest. Beneath his shirt, hidden just below his skin, was a device, a small, sleek piece of technology that had been implanted years ago, long before he ever set foot on this alien ship. A piece of tech so advanced, even the aliens had no idea it existed. It was a failsafe, an emergency escape mechanism, one that tapped into an energy source far beyond their understanding. And now, it was active. I told you, Ethan said, his voice low but filled with conviction, you've never faced humanity before. The ship was an enigma. The walls hummed with a low, constant vibration, the metallic surface gleaming under harsh lighting. The corridors stretched out in seemingly endless lines, like veins running through the heart of the vessel. And Ethan, bound by invisible force fields, was being dragged through them like a mere pawn in a game that he didn't fully understand. Zyra walked beside him, her sharp eyes scanning the hallway ahead. Her presence was commanding, her movements deliberate and controlled. She was accustomed to the fear she instilled in others. She had spent centuries crushing civilizations, watching them wither and fall. And yet, this human, this Ethan Parker, was different. He had done something none of the others had. He had refused to bow to her. And in that refusal, there was a challenge, something she could not ignore. The guards beside them, towering and armored, moved in complete synchronization, their blank, emotionless faces barely visible behind their helmets. But as they walked, Ethan could feel their eyes on him, assessing, calculating. They, too, were waiting for something. They, too, felt the weight of the unknown. And that unknown, in turn, rested squarely on his shoulders. You're not like the others, Zyra said suddenly, her voice breaking the heavy silence. It was not a question, but a statement. You have power. But not in the way I expected. Ethan's gaze shifted toward her, his defiance still evident in his posture. You have no idea what I'm capable of, he said, his voice low, controlled. Zyra's lips curled into a thin, predatory smile. I know exactly what you're capable of. You're just another human, weak, fragile, easily crushed. But something about you has intrigued me. I can't quite figure it out. Ethan gritted his teeth, resisting the urge to snap back. He had learned the hard way that a war of words with Zyra would get him nowhere. But there was something else, something deep inside of him that was ready to come alive. He had no idea what the next step would be, but he had learned that in situations like this, patience was a weapon. He had to stay sharp, keep his mind working. They passed through a set of imposing doors, and the chamber that greeted them was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. It was vast, circular, and lined with strange alien technology, each piece pulsating with energy. The center of the room housed a massive console, glowing with shifting colors, its surface covered in symbols that made no sense to him. It was as though this was the heart of the ship, where its secrets were hidden. Zyra motioned for him to be seated, and he obeyed, though the chains around his wrists buzzed with an uncomfortable static. A chair formed beneath him, alien in design, but surprisingly comfortable. As he sat, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the situation bearing down on him. The energy in the room was palpable, almost suffocating. "Now, let's talk," Zyra said, her voice colder now. "Tell me how you managed to survive the breach. How you activated that device of yours. And why the hell you haven't died yet." Ethan's eyes flickered briefly to the glowing console. He could sense something beneath the surface, something that didn't quite match the usual alien technology he had seen. There was an ancient power here, far beyond anything he had encountered in his lifetime. He remained silent for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. Zyra's impatience grew, but she didn't press him further, knowing he wouldn't reveal anything easily. Then, slowly, Ethan spoke. "You're asking the wrong questions," he said quietly. "It's not about what I can do. It's about what humanity is capable of. Something you've clearly never understood." Zyra's gaze sharpened. "Explain." Ethan leaned forward, despite the restraints, his eyes locking onto hers. "You think you've seen power, Zyra, but you've only seen dominance. Power is about resilience, adaptability. It's about overcoming obstacles, no matter how insurmountable they seem. Your species, your empire, it's built on control. But control can only last so long." Zyra's mouth twisted in annoyance, but there was a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. She hadn't expected this. She hadn't expected a human to speak like this. His words, though simple, held a weight that made her uneasy. "You talk of resilience," she said, her voice tight, "but your kind is weak. Fragile. The galaxy has proven that. I've watched entire civilizations fall in the blink of an eye. Because those civilizations never understood what it means to survive," Ethan shot back, his voice growing in strength. "You think you've destroyed us, but you're wrong. We don't die. Not like you think we do. We keep coming back. We learn, we grow. And we adapt." Zyra stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "You speak of your species as if they're something extraordinary. But I've seen hundreds of species claim the same thing. What makes Earth different?" Ethan's eyes narrowed. This was it. This was the moment to plant the seed of doubt. He didn't have all the answers, but he knew one thing for sure: humans weren't just survivors. They were fighters. "Your mistake is thinking you've seen everything," he said, leaning forward again, his voice full of quiet confidence. "But you haven't. There's something on Earth you'll never understand, something that's been hidden for centuries. And when you figure it out, it will be too late." Zyra's eyes flashed with suspicion. "Hidden? What are you talking about?" Before he could respond, the console behind them flickered to life, the strange symbols shifting and rearranging themselves at an alarming speed. Ethan watched in silence, his instincts telling him this was no coincidence. The alien technology wasn't just reacting to his words, it was responding to something more. Suddenly, a deep, resonant voice echoed from the speakers embedded in the walls. "Commander Zyra, we have detected an anomaly in the human's biosignature. It is unlike anything we've encountered before." Zyra turned sharply toward the speakers, her face hardening. "What is this anomaly?" The voice paused for a moment before responding. "We're unable to determine the exact nature, but it appears to be linked to his genetic code. There is something ancient. Something dormant. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. The strange energy he had felt earlier, the device implanted within him, it was somehow linked to his own biology. But how? And why had it been activated now? Zyra's eyes turned back to him, now narrowed in suspicion. What have you done, human? What is this power you've unlocked? Ethan's mind raced, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. His thoughts went back to his past, the experiments he had undergone, the strange circumstances that had led him to this point. The truth was elusive, but it was there, buried deep within his memories. I didn't do anything, he said slowly, his voice filled with an unsettling calm. It's not a power I unlocked, it's one that's always been there. Hidden in every human. Waiting to be awakened. Zyra's expression was one of disbelief, but also something else, fear. She took a step back, her hand hovering near the weapon at her side. This doesn't make sense. No human has ever shown this kind of potential. How are you even alive? Ethan's lips curved into a small smile. You think you know everything about us, Zyra. But you've only scratched the surface. And soon, you'll understand why humanity is the most dangerous species in the galaxy. The room was silent, the tension so thick it could be cut with a knife. Zyra's eyes never left him as she processed his words, her mind racing to understand the implications. And in that silence, Ethan knew that something had changed, he had planted a seed of doubt. A doubt that would fester in the back of Zyra's mind, slowly unraveling her confidence, piece by piece. For the first time since he had been captured, Ethan felt a surge of hope. They had underestimated him, and now they were beginning to realize that mistake. And in that realization, lay their downfall. The atmosphere on the alien ship had shifted since Ethan's conversation with Zyra. The sharp edge of her superiority had dulled, replaced by something Ethan couldn't quite identify, a sense of uncertainty, a crack in the facade of invulnerability that she had carried for centuries. But he knew better than to get comfortable. He wasn't out of danger yet. They moved him to a new chamber, this one smaller, more claustrophobic, with dark, angular walls that seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. The air was thick with tension as the guards stationed themselves at the door, their cold, emotionless eyes fixed on him. Ethan had learned by now that his movements were being closely monitored. Every shift in his posture, every word he spoke, was analyzed. But the true enemy wasn't the guards. It wasn't even Zyra. The true enemy was the knowledge that his time was running out. The energy from the device embedded in his chest was fading, its power slowly diminishing. Whatever had caused it to activate was a mystery, but it was clear that it was connected to the strange, dormant potential buried deep within his DNA. If he didn't find out what that was soon, he might never get the chance. The door to the chamber slid open with a low hiss, and Zyra entered, flanked by two of her most trusted warriors. Her gaze swept over Ethan, and for a moment, he thought he saw something akin to respect in her eyes. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the familiar, calculated coldness. Tell me, human, Zyra began, her voice measured, how is it that you survived the breach? How did your heart continue beating when it should have ceased? Ethan's eyes narrowed, but he refused to give in to the pressure of her questioning. You're obsessed with power, he said quietly. But power is not the same as survival. Zyra's lips curled into a faint, condescending smile. Survival? Do you really think your species can survive against us, human? We are the warborn. We have conquered countless civilizations, and yours is no different. You are weak. And when you are crushed, I will stand over your broken remains, and I will remember you as nothing more than a fleeting inconvenience. Ethan remained silent, his thoughts racing. He had to stall. He had to learn more, understand more. There was something about the way she spoke, the certainty in her voice, the unshakable belief in the superiority of her species, that bothered him. She couldn't be right. Not about humanity. There was more to them than she realized, and he would make sure she learned that, even if it meant putting everything on the line. Power, he said softly, his voice carrying the weight of something unspoken. What if the reason you've never truly conquered is because you don't understand the nature of power? What if the thing that makes us dangerous isn't something you can conquer? Zyra tilted her head, studying him with narrowed eyes. She clearly wasn't expecting such a response. What do you mean by that? Ethan stood up, his movements slow and deliberate, and faced her. You talk about power as if it's something you can possess. Something you can control. But what if power isn't a thing you can hold in your hand? What if it's not something you can harness, but something you have to awaken? The room seemed to grow still, as if the very air was holding its breath. Zyra's eyes flickered with a mixture of confusion and suspicion. You speak in riddles, human. It's not a riddle, Ethan replied, his tone firm. The truth is, you've misunderstood humanity. You see us as weak, fragile. But you've never considered that we might have something you can't see. Something that can't be measured by your standards. Something that makes us different. Zyra stepped closer, her expression darkening. What are you trying to say? Ethan exhaled slowly, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on him. He was walking a fine line, but he had to say it now. He had to plant the seed in her mind, make her question everything she thought she knew. I'm saying, he said, his voice steady, that humanity has always been underestimated. But that underestimation has been our greatest weapon. You think you can crush us because we lack your technology or your advanced weapons. But you're wrong. Our true power is something you can't see. Something you can't control. Our ability to adapt, to learn, to survive, that is what makes us dangerous. Zyra was silent for a long moment, her eyes boring into him as if she were trying to peel away the layers of his words. She clearly wasn't used to hearing such things from her prisoners. But Ethan knew she had to understand. The power of humanity wasn't in their physical strength or their technology. It was in their relentless drive to survive, to fight back even when the odds were impossible. You think this power you speak of is what kept you alive, Zyra said, her tone now laced with something darker. But it is only a matter of time before you break. Your species has no place in the galaxy. Ethan's lips curled into a small smile. You're wrong. It's not just about survival. It's about resilience. We fight back when we have nothing left. And that's something you'll never understand. Zyra's gaze turned cold again, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes, something that almost resembled doubt. It was brief, fleeting, but it was there. Suddenly, the console at the center of the room flickered to life, its holographic display casting eerie blue light on the walls. The alien symbols on the screen shifted, rearranging themselves in a pattern Ethan couldn't decipher. He didn't need to understand them to know that something important was happening. The ship was reacting to him. Commander Zyra, a voice said from the console, cutting through the tension in the room. We have detected an anomaly. There is something different about this human. His genetic code is unlike anything we've encountered. It is activating something in the ship's systems. Zyra's eyes widened. What do you mean? What's happening? The voice on the console hesitated before responding. The energy signature is not from any known source. It is not organic, but it is tied to the human's biology. We believe it is a dormant power, something that has been locked away for millennia. It is awakening now. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He had known something was wrong, but hearing it from the ship's systems confirmed his suspicions. The device embedded in his chest, the strange energy he had felt, this was more than just a failsafe. It was connected to something much older, something buried deep within human history. Zyra turned to face him, her eyes now filled with a mix of fury and fear. What have you done? What is this power? Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he allowed the silence to stretch, giving her a moment to process the gravity of what had just been revealed. You think you know everything about us, Zyra, he said quietly. But you have no idea what humanity is truly capable of. Zyra's lips parted in a snarl, but she said nothing. She was too stunned, too rattled to speak. Ethan could see it in her eyes, her belief that the Warborn were invincible was beginning to crack. She didn't have the answers. She didn't understand what she was up against. And that was his advantage. The ship seemed to hum louder now, the energy in the room shifting as the anomaly within Ethan's body continued to interact with the alien systems. He could feel it, a strange, tingling sensation running through his veins. The power was awakening, and he wasn't sure what it would do, or what it could do to the ship and its crew. But one thing was certain, whatever it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about humanity. And it was about to change everything. This is the beginning of Part 3, The Hidden Power, setting the stage for Ethan's emerging connection to the ship's systems and the mysterious, dormant power in his genetics. Let me know if you'd like me to continue with the next section. 4.0. You said. No, right. Part 4 and Part 4 will be minimum 2,000 words. ChatGPT said. Here is the first part of Part 4, The Rising Resistance. I'll continue in smaller sections to meet your word count requirement. Part 4, The Rising Resistance. The chamber was alive with noise, the hum of alien technology mingling with the low, almost imperceptible vibrations of the ship's engines. The walls around Ethan seemed to close in on him, their cold, metallic surface reflecting his face back at him in distorted, fractured ways. But he had no time for self-reflection. The time for thinking was over. Now, it was time to act. He had been locked in this room for what felt like days. The guards outside had kept him confined, and Zyra had visited him several times to question him about the strange energy that had been emanating from him ever since the ship's systems had started reacting. Each time she came, she grew more desperate. Her questions more frantic. But Ethan refused to give her answers. He knew that the key to his survival lay in his ability to resist her influence. Her arrogance had blinded her to the truth, that humans weren't just helpless creatures to be crushed underfoot. The Warborn had underestimated humanity for far too long. As he paced the room, a series of thoughts collided in his mind. He could feel the device in his chest pulsing, its power slowly growing. Every time the ship's systems responded to his presence, that pulse quickened. But it wasn't just the ship reacting to him. It was his own body. The device, or whatever it was tied to his genetic code. He could feel it now, a strange sensation spreading through his limbs, like his very cells were waking up. The power that had been dormant in him for so long, perhaps for his entire species, was awakening. It wasn't something he fully understood, but he knew one thing: it was linked to the energy systems of this ship, a ship that belonged to the most advanced species in the galaxy. And somehow, this power was the key to breaking free. Ethan's mind raced with possibilities. But even as his thoughts circled, there was something more immediate pressing against him, a nagging feeling that something was about to change. A door slid open, and a figure stepped into the room. It was Lena. Her presence was almost ghostly, her form shadowed in the dim light of the chamber. But Ethan had recognized her the moment she stepped through the door. She was the human he had seen earlier, the one who had seemed out of place, too calm, too collected, like she knew more than she let on. Lena's eyes locked onto his, and for the first time in days, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. There was something about her, something that made him believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of this. "Ethan," she said softly, her voice low and urgent. "We don't have much time." He nodded, his heartbeat quickening. "What's going on? Why are you here?" Lena stepped closer, her eyes darting around to ensure they were alone. "You were right. They don't understand what they're dealing with. The power you've unlocked, it's not just in you. It's in all of us." Ethan's brow furrowed. "What do you mean? What power?" Lena glanced at the door nervously, then back at him. I don't know how to explain it, but I can feel it too. The ship's systems, they're reacting to us. To our genetic codes. It's as if the ship recognizes something about us. Something ancient. It's waking up. Ethan's pulse quickened. This wasn't just about him anymore. If Lena was feeling the same thing, then humanity was linked to the ship in ways they hadn't even begun to understand. Are you saying that the ship knows who we are? Ethan asked, trying to piece together the fragments of information that had been swirling in his mind. Lena nodded, her expression grim. Yes. But it's not just the ship. It's everything. The Warborn, they don't know this, but they've encountered our kind before. A long time ago. They were forced to retreat, to abandon their conquest of Earth. Ethan's thoughts raced. He had heard nothing of this, but the way Lena spoke, the urgency in her voice, it made sense. Why? Why did they retreat? And why are they coming back now? Lena's eyes softened, a hint of sorrow flashing in them. Because of what you've unlocked, Ethan. What we've unlocked. The Warborn came to Earth millennia ago, and they found something they couldn't control. They left, but now they're back. And they want to finish what they started. Ethan's mind reeled. His genetic code. The device. This ship. The Warborn's failed invasion of Earth, it was all connected. The truth was starting to come together, but it was still blurry, incomplete. Lena took a deep breath, as though gathering her thoughts. There's more, though. We're not just dealing with the Warborn. There's something else in play here, something older, something that's been lying dormant for centuries. The device inside you, the one that activated when you came aboard this ship, it's part of something much bigger. Ethan swallowed hard. What is it? What is inside me? Lena shook her head. I don't have all the answers. But I think I know someone who does. Before Ethan could respond, a sudden, sharp sound echoed through the ship, a high-pitched tone that made his ears ring. The lights flickered, and for a moment, everything went dark. A few seconds later, the lights came back on, but something had changed. The ship was no longer as quiet as it had been. The walls seemed to hum with a low vibration, and the air was thick with static. Lena stepped back, her face tightening with concern. They've found out. We've been compromised. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. Who? The Warborn, Lena whispered, her voice barely audible. They know we're awake. They know that we're not what they thought we were. Suddenly, the door to the chamber slid open with a metallic screech. Several guards, heavily armed and clad in dark, sleek armor, stormed into the room. Their expressions were unreadable, but the tension in their bodies was palpable. They had been alerted to the disturbance. Ethan Parker, one of the guards said in a deep, mechanical voice. You are to come with us immediately. Lena stepped in front of him, her stance protective, her eyes narrowed. Not a chance. The lead guard raised his weapon, but before he could make a move, something strange happened. Ethan felt the power inside him surge again. The device, whatever it was, began to hum louder, and the air around him seemed to shimmer. In that instant, Lena's eyes widened. It's happening. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. The power inside him was awakening, and it wasn't just the ship's systems that were responding anymore. It was him, he was controlling it. Somehow, he was tapping into the ship's energy, connecting with it in ways he didn't fully understand. The guards froze, their weapons aimed at him, but they hesitated. They could feel it too, the strange energy that was now emanating from him. And in that hesitation, Ethan saw his opportunity. I told you, he said, his voice low but filled with a newfound confidence. You can't control this. No one can. With a sudden movement, Ethan raised his hand. The energy inside him flared, and the air around him crackled with intensity. The guards staggered back, their armor humming with static, their movements sluggish as if they were being held in place by an invisible force. Lena's eyes were wide with shock. "Ethan, you're doing it." But it wasn't just the guards that were affected. The entire ship seemed to respond to the surge of power. The walls trembled, the lights flickered again, and the hum of the engines grew louder, almost as if the ship itself was coming alive. Ethan's mind raced as he realized what was happening. He wasn't just tapping into the ship's systems, he was controlling them. He was part of the ship now. His biology was linked to it. And this was only the beginning. Lena grabbed his arm, her voice urgent. "We need to move. Now. Before they figure out what you're doing." Ethan nodded, his mind still reeling from the discovery. But there was no time to process it. They had to move quickly, before the Warborn realized just how powerful he had become. This is the start of Part 4, The Rising Resistance, showing Ethan's growing power and the increasing danger from the Warborn. I'll continue the story and develop more of the rising tension in the following sections. Let me know if you want me to continue. 4-0. You said. No, right. Part 5 and Part 5 will be minimum 2,000 words. ChatGPT said. Here is the first section of Part 5, Battle for the Future. I will provide the story in sections to meet your 2,000-word requirement. Part 5, Battle for the Future. The ship trembled beneath Ethan's feet, its walls groaning as if in protest. The air was thick with tension as the power within him surged, an invisible current flowing through the very core of the vessel. He had done it. Somehow, in that split second of hesitation, he had unlocked something that no one, especially not the Warborn, had expected. Lena's grip on his arm tightened as they sprinted down the corridor, her breath coming in short gasps. The guards behind them were still reeling from the surge of energy that had stopped them in their tracks, but they wouldn't stay down for long. They knew they were dealing with something far more dangerous than they had anticipated. "Ethan, we need to find the central control room," Lena urged, her voice urgent. "It's the only way we can shut down the ship's systems. If we can control the mainframe, we might be able to get out of here." Ethan nodded, though his mind was racing. His heart pounded in his chest as the power continued to build within him. A force that seemed to grow stronger with every passing second. It wasn't just his connection to the ship that was intensifying, it was something else, something buried deep within him. He had no idea what it was, but he could feel its presence, like a dormant beast stirring from a long slumber. "Just keep moving," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos swirling around him. "We don't have much time." They rounded another corner, and for a brief moment, Ethan caught a glimpse of the alien soldiers closing in from the other end of the hallway. They were coming faster now, their sleek armor glinting in the dim light as they moved with precision and purpose. They weren't going to let them escape. The power inside Ethan surged again, this time more intensely than before. He barely had time to think as the ship's systems responded to his presence once again. This time, it wasn't just the walls that trembled. The entire corridor lit up with a brilliant blue glow, as energy conduits along the floor and walls began to pulse with life. Lena glanced at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of awe and fear. "Ethan, we can't let them reach us. Do something." Without thinking, Ethan raised his hand, and the power within him flared to life. The energy that surged through his body extended outward, an invisible force crashing into the approaching soldiers. They were thrown back, slamming into the walls with a violent force that left them momentarily stunned. "Move!" Ethan shouted, pulling Lena forward as the soldiers struggled to regain their footing. The path ahead was clear for now, but they both knew it wouldn't last. The Warborn were formidable. They didn't give up easily, and Ethan knew they would adapt quickly. The only chance they had was to reach the central control room before they were cornered. The ship's corridors seemed to stretch on forever, but finally, they reached a large, circular door. It was made of a strange, iridescent material, pulsing with energy. This had to be it, the control room. Ethan stepped forward, his hand outstretched toward the door. He felt the power inside him surge again, and this time, it was different. It wasn't just the ship's systems responding, it was as if the ship itself recognized him, as if it was calling to him. The door slid open with a low hiss, revealing a vast chamber filled with towering consoles and glowing screens. The central hub of the ship, where all its systems converged. This was where they would make their stand. But there was no time to savor the victory. The door behind them slammed shut with a resounding thud, and the sound of heavy footsteps echoed down the hallway. The Warborn were close, too close. They had already begun to regroup. "Ethan, we need to hurry," Lena urged, rushing toward the nearest console. She quickly began typing commands into the interface, but the system was more complex than anything she had ever seen. Ethan's mind was racing. He could feel the power inside him, alive and thrumming, like an electric current running through his veins. The strange energy that had activated within him was becoming harder to control, but it was his only hope now. He needed to tap into it fully. His fingers hovered over the nearest control panel. The console's surface was smooth and slick, its holographic display flickering with alien symbols. He didn't know how to operate it, but he knew something about it. He could feel the ship's systems, its energy, like an extension of himself. Lena looked up at him, her expression frantic. "Ethan, please, we don't have much time. If we don't disable the ship's systems, we'll be sitting ducks." "I'm trying," he said, gritting his teeth. "I can feel it. The power. It's here. I just need to reach it." He closed his eyes, focusing on the sensation in his chest. The device embedded in his skin hummed louder now, its pulse in sync with the rising energy within him. The power surged, and suddenly, Ethan felt a flood of knowledge, like a stream of information rushing into his mind. The ship's systems, the conduits, the algorithms, it all began to make sense. "I've got it," he said, his voice filled with wonder and fear. "I can control it." Lena stepped back, her eyes wide with realization. "You can control the ship?" Ethan nodded, his gaze fixed on the console. He didn't have all the answers, but he had something more important: control. He could feel the ship's heart, its lifeblood, flowing through him. The ship wasn't just a vessel, it was a living thing, and he was its master now. But just as he was about to act, the door to the control room burst open with a deafening crash. The Warborn had arrived. Zyra, flanked by her elite guards, stood in the doorway, her eyes blazing with fury. She was more than just angry now, she was terrified. "Ethan Parker," she bellowed, her voice cold and filled with venom. "You dare defy us? You think you can control what has been beyond your comprehension for centuries?" Ethan's heart raced, but he didn't flinch. The power within him was stronger than ever, and he knew what he had to do. He wasn't going to back down. "Not now." "I told you," he said, his voice unwavering, "you've underestimated us. You've underestimated me." Zyra's eyes narrowed. "You think you've won? You think you've mastered this ship? You know nothing of its true power." But Ethan wasn't listening anymore. He reached out, and with a single thought, the ship responded. The walls around them shuddered as the energy coursing through the vessel surged, rippling outward like a shockwave. Zyra's guards were thrown back, their bodies slamming into the walls with incredible force. The ship itself seemed to groan in protest, its systems reacting to Ethan's newfound control. Ethan's eyes never left Zyra as she staggered back, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. "No," she screamed. Her voice a mixture of fury and fear. "This ship belongs to us. You cannot." But Ethan wasn't listening anymore. He focused on the power inside him, letting it guide him, letting it flow through the ship. He wasn't just controlling the ship's systems anymore. He was commanding them. With a single gesture, the doors to the control room slammed shut, sealing them inside. Zyra's soldiers, now incapacitated, were left outside, powerless to stop him. But it wasn't over yet. The ship was still in danger, and the Warborn weren't going to give up. They would keep coming. And this battle, this fight for survival, was far from over. The hum of the ship grew louder as Ethan stood in the center of the control room, his hands raised, fingers trembling slightly as the power coursed through his veins. The walls around him seemed to pulse with an eerie resonance, as though the very vessel had come alive, responding to his every thought, every command. This was it, the culmination of everything he had fought for, everything he had unlocked. Lena stood beside him, her gaze fixed on the screens flickering with alien symbols. She had helped him get this far, but now it was up to him. She had no idea what to do next. This was beyond anyone's understanding. The Warborn were not just coming for him. They were coming for humanity. The stakes had never been higher. The ship, their ship, was about to be their greatest weapon. And if he could control it, humanity could stand a chance against the galaxy's greatest conquerors. The path to freedom was right in front of him, but it was not going to be an easy journey. Every part of him could feel the intensity of the moment, the magnitude of the decision he was about to make. A voice crackled through the communication system. "Commander Zyra, the human has taken control of the ship's systems. We must engage immediately. Failure is not an option." The harshness of the voice was like a slap in the face. It was an order, a directive, and it carried the weight of Zyra's absolute authority. But Ethan wasn't intimidated. No, now he was in control. And the Warborn's time had run out. Lena turned to him, her expression tight with worry. "Ethan, this is it. If you're going to do something, you need to act now." He glanced at her, his mind already working through the possibilities. The Warborn would never let him leave the ship alive. They had tried to suppress humanity once before, but that time was over. The truth was clear now, humanity was not weak. It was resilient. They could adapt, learn, and survive in ways no other species had ever managed. The power inside him surged again. It felt like a tidal wave crashing against the shores of his consciousness, a force so great it threatened to drown him. But instead of retreating, he embraced it. He welcomed it. The energy in his body had become a part of him. And now, it was time to use it. Lena watched him, knowing that this was his moment, their moment. The final confrontation with Zyra and her forces would decide the fate of both their people. Humanity's struggle for survival had come down to this one last, desperate stand. "Ethan," Lena said, her voice barely a whisper. "You have to believe in yourself. This power, it's not just from the ship. It's from all of us. From Earth." Ethan nodded, his hands tightening into fists. "I know. I've seen it. We're connected to something greater, something beyond the stars. It's time they learned that." He turned back to the control panel, his eyes flashing with determination. The ship was alive with energy, and in that energy, he saw the ghosts of every civilization that had ever been wiped out by the Warborn. The ship's systems, with their ancient, complex design, held the remnants of an ancient power, one that the Warborn had never understood. But Ethan did. He could feel it, deep inside. The ship's core was a living, breathing entity. It was powered by an energy far beyond what any species in the galaxy could fully comprehend. And now, it had chosen him. Without a word, Ethan stretched out his hand, feeling the connection between himself and the ship. The walls vibrated as the power surged, humming with an intensity that made the air seem thick, like static before a storm. He could hear the hum, the deep, resonating pulse that was the heartbeat of the ship. It was alive, and so was he. He closed his eyes, focusing all of his energy on the core, on the force that had been dormant for millennia. The Warborn thought they could control everything. They thought they could crush humanity, but they had underestimated one thing: Earth's legacy. The resilience that ran through humanity's veins was tied to the ship itself. And now, Ethan was its conduit. The ship shuddered as the power began to awaken fully. A wave of energy blasted from the core, sending shockwaves through the corridors. The Warborn, who had been preparing their attack, were caught off guard. Their weapons faltered, and for the first time, they felt a tremor of fear. Zyra stood in the command center, her eyes wide with disbelief. She had never imagined that Ethan, this fragile human, could wield such power. But here it was, undeniable and terrifying. The walls of the control room flickered with energy as the systems came online. The ship responded to Ethan's command, its systems aligning with his will. In that moment, he felt a bond with the ship, as though it was part of him. And for the first time, he understood the full extent of humanity's potential. "You've made a mistake, Zyra," Ethan said, his voice calm, but filled with an undeniable force. "You thought you could control us. You thought you could break us. But we're not the ones who will fall. You are." Zyra, Ethan's gaze never wavered. "Maybe. But the difference is, I'm the one who holds the strings now." A blast of energy surged from the ship's core, and the control room's holographic displays flickered as the Warborn's weapon systems began to fail. The power of the ship flowed through the room, its immense energy pushing against the invaders like an unstoppable force. The Warborn tried to counteract it, but their technology, advanced as it was no match for the power now coursing through the vessel. Zyra screamed in frustration as her soldiers faltered. "Regroup. We will crush this human." But it was already too late. Ethan extended his hand, focusing the ship's energy outward. The Warborn soldiers were thrown back, their bodies colliding with the walls as if struck by an invisible force. One by one, they fell, incapacitated by the sheer power of the ship. The ship's systems were no longer under the Warborn's control. They were under Ethan's. Zyra staggered back, her face twisted with fury and disbelief. She had never seen anything like this before. A human, no, an entire species, rising up against her and her empire. And now, it seemed, humanity was the one in control. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "This can't be." Ethan's eyes locked with hers. "It's over, Zyra. Your reign ends here." With a final surge of energy, Ethan harnessed the full power of the ship. The ship's engines roared to life, its energy systems crackling with intense power. The walls shook, the floors trembled, and the entire vessel seemed to come alive. The Warborn were finished. And just like that, the battle was over.